There's some irony in this. Kind of a weird cyclical nature to it. Whenever I first started, Slipknot was one of the first bands that I ever did a big negative exploit of. And throughout the course of the 11 years that I've been on YouTube, there has been this slow transformation that has taken place from reviewing their last new album to doing a full discography review of each album that they have done, with the exception of their very earliest. And now here we are with We Are Not Your Kind by Slipknot. Kind of apropos that right before I step down, I do have to talk about this band and revisit them one final time. And I think it's fair, considering the transformation that has taken place over the course of the past decade. Not to mention the band themselves. The band have gone through many phases, and there has been a lot that has happened in the 5 years that have come ever since their last album. There has been lineup shifts, there have been arguments, lawsuits, you name it. This band has probably gone through it. Corey Taylor himself has had 15,000 microphones shoved in his face from everybody from Blabbermouth to Metal Sucks, and has also gone through a divorce. So what do these 14 tracks encase? This is over 1 hour worth of music, and you see a lot of things just by looking at its track listing that immediately tell you this is going to be quite different. I mean, let's be honest, before you even listen to one note, you just look and admire the track listing alongside the time the tracks will last, and you just say to yourself that experimentation probably works in their favor. At least, that would be the assumption. So let's insert the coin, let's get going. Let's talk about We Are Not Your Kind by Slipknot. And you're starting off with Insert Coin. This is one of 3 such tracks that are sort of like these little set pieces that they are aiming to be sort of an introduction, either that or a bridge between 2 songs. Insert Coin does so to lead into Unsainted, which definitely has the feel of sort of an old school Slipknot song, and it does have some modern ideals that are sort of spliced within it and thrown against the wall along with the rest of the spaghetti in order to create a very aggressive and honestly a pretty darn good opener. I like the fact that this song feels like it has that aggressive single notion to it. It definitely feels like it would carry over to perhaps the single status on the radio quite well. Honestly, it's been a long time since I've listened to the radio in general, so I have no idea if elements of aggression from bands such as Slipknot still parade the radios at the same rates as they once did. I remember that in the mid-2000s, I couldn't go an hour without hearing a couple of Slipknot songs, and of course they were a much bigger band at that point, but they are still of modest popularity here in 2019, so I don't see that it would be that different. Not a bad song, I have to say. Great opener to get things going. Birth of the Cruel, another song that immediately, whenever you listen to it, just has that flash of single potential, and also has a very turn back the clock feel to it. This almost has a lot of the elements that you would have heard many, many years ago, perhaps on some of the earliest Slipknot recordings, and you're starting to get a sense of some of the experimentation that's taking place here, because they are examining different eras of their own band while also trying to thrust a couple of new tricks into the table. And they've always had an aggressive element to it. They've always had kind of a pseudo-thrash, pseudo-metalcore, pseudo-industrial side to them. We're going to talk about a little bit more of those later, but this is one where they go back to really the past. So, and they're doing their own, I guess, best impression of the angry video game nerd on themselves, and the track that we get from it is pretty decent, and you can see a lot of Slipknot fans, I could see a lot of maggots really celebrating this song quite a bit. Death Because of Death is another one of those set pieces similar to Insert Coin that bridges the gap between this and Nero Forte, which is a little bit more of a darker track, and you're going to hear that there's a lot of darkness on this record. It is one that has the aggressiveness that is sort of underpinned around all of this. You know, it is the one thing that is sort of keeping this together and keeping it cohesive. It sounds very much through and through like a Slipknot track, but there is, or a Slipknot album, but there seems to be a little bit of an enhancement to everything. So the areas where there's a little bit more darkness and a little bit more of a chill behind the songs, they exist, and it does so in a big way. The aggression is definitely richer and has a lot more of that power and that just, you know, sort of buzzsaw feel to it. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Nero Forte also shows that Corey's vocals, the way in which he is able to really jostle between the different voices and the different styles that he brings to the table is still 100% part of his repertoire. It's not something that has decayed at all over the course of the years. He is still able to transpose himself from a very aggressive near death metal voice to a very aggressive rap style, flurry of lyricism, to the the very centered, the very song-centered, melodic tones that you would hear in Slipknot songs past, and also in his other project, Stone Sour. So you get a lot from just that, and Critical Darling is showcasing that a little bit also. These two tracks, by the way, both eclipse the 5-minute mark. Critical Darling, in fact, the 6-minute mark, I find it to be a little bit more of a slouch than Nero Forte. I felt that was one that really showcased the band really taking some steps forward and doing some things to maybe try to change up the norm a little bit, and I like that. But then getting to A Liar's Funeral, which is the track that immediately follows Critical Darling, this is the snarl song, as I will call it. This is also, consequently, maybe the best Slipknot song that I have ever heard, and I've listened to each album to this stage. It's been a while, but I don't remember any song of theirs really attracting me as much as A Liar's Funeral did with its initial listens. And I think it's because of the elements of truth that are no doubt behind it due to external things that have happened within the band over the course of the past few years. Not to mention just the way the song is constructed. It has a devil inside of it, and it is extracted through these death metal snarls that you hear throughout it. It is 100% beautifully pasted next to this very aggressive, very dark sounding backing track, and the percussion just thumps in your ears and gives you a nice escorted view through the pain, the madness, the anger that really is... It's documented right on this song, and it is well crafted, well executed, well done. At this point in time, halfway through this record, I have been somewhat impressed. Mostly because this sounds like the same band from albums in years past, but does not at the same time. It sounds like a band that is being more adventurous. It sounds like a band that took the time to really decide to go in some different directions and focus their attack while also experimenting with delivery. Kind of like a pitcher that decides that it needs a third or a fourth pitch and decides to apply that to his pre-existing repertoire of a fastball and a curveball. It's a nice touch, and it's something that does aid with longevity of bands, because the more tools that you have at your disposal and you're able to present, the more that you're going to really garner the respect of a wider audience. If you do the same thing over and over again, you may appease a mass of fans, but there's going to be a lot of fringers that are going to say, well, they're just kind of doing the same thing over and over again. I think Nickelback gets a lot of flack, because they've essentially recycled the same album idea for 15 years, actually going on 20 at this stage. That's why, despite the fact they still have a legion of fans that are huge in numbers, there's a lot of folks on the outside that are laughing at them. Slipknot doesn't want to be laughed at. They want to be taken seriously. And by taking these steps, they are certainly on their way to not only reinvigorating those fans of old, but gaining new fans despite the fact that they've been at it for 25 years. And that's all you can really hope for as a group. Now, I say all of this for very good reason. Red Flag really just, as aggressive as it was and as decent of a track it was, after A Liar's Funeral just pales in comparison. This almost feels like a cool-down song after the snarl of A Liar's Funeral, despite the fact that Red Flag was in fact more aggressive. What's next is the third of those set pieces that are able to bridge songs, and it goes right into Spiders, which is very creative. I like this song because of its creativity. It has a very sort of horror feel to it. And there was a Rammstein song from their brand new album earlier this year that also sort of shared the same veneer, where they're able to create real unease based off of composition. And lyricism itself also aided within this, asking who is the food and who is the mate, either that or whatever it may be. And it is something that drives this composition into being moderately uncomfortable, and that's the point. And I like that. I like the fact that what's next rolls right into the song. Really, the way in which everything has been framed on this album is exquisite thus far, and I have to give them a lot of credit for that. But whenever it comes to the song itself is memorable due to the unease that you can feel while listening to it. Hardcore metal veterans aren't going to feel that much unease. I'm going to just say it right now. If you're going in there expecting it to be something along the lines of suicidal black metal or grindcore, you're not going to get what you're expecting. But for a big band that has the masses and a large fan base, this is going to have that sort of horror film unease feel to it, and I like it. The next 3 tracks are all 6 minutes in length or greater. Orphan, My Pain, and Not Long for This World. I have to say that these 3 tracks had a lot of potential for me that was outwardly somewhat ruined by a common trope among all of them. And really something that even moves into Solway Firth, which is the final song on the album, which is nearly 6 minutes by itself. And that's the fact that these songs all are introduced by these long minute-plus periods of sort of build. And it's not build that's necessarily by instrumentalization. It has this sort of faux industrial feel to it, this sort of building block, trying to showcase, almost like it was cinematic, trying to do a hard shot on somebody who is slowly but surely transforming into the emotion that's going to be described on the song itself. So for example, Orphan is one that builds into a more thrashy experience and has a lot of aggression that is behind it. This one felt like it had some experimentation behind it, but not much. Instead, it felt like a Slipknot song that just was able to extend due to some of these artificial means. My Pain is definitely Corey Taylor, I would say, at his most vulnerable. And this is a song that kind of shows maybe how you feel whenever the world feels like it is weighing you down. There's a lot of great lyricism on this song, and it is one where the vulnerability comes forward. It almost drips out like blood or like sweat. And I like the composition behind it being a little bit more naked and sparse in moments, considering that helps to further illustrate that element and those feelings. I love that. That was very well done, though once again, it is amplified and helped, assisted by a long introductory period before we really get into things. And Not Long for This World just feels like it sort of swung and missed overall. And really, whenever you consider a song like that, you almost wonder if that's an apt, final track for a career. You know what I mean? Just based off of title alone. However, this is a track. This feels like it sort of swung and missed based off of that same trope, as well as also just feeling like the weakest of the 3 6-minute encounters that we just had. Solway Firth is a decent ending point for this very different, this very experimental, this very interesting album from Slipknot, a band that has sort of followed me throughout my years. And it's one that I feel kind of got bogged down a little bit at the end by some of those shortcomings. But overall, they were able to illuminate and experiment just enough in order to make it feel really bigger than it actually was, or almost forgivable. The experimentation does show that this band has no desire and really just no drive to be a carbon copy knockoff of itself. It doesn't wish to recycle its own ideas all of that often in order to construct albums. They want each album to be its own statement, and they want each album to relay its own memory upon its listener. And We Are Not Your Kind, I feel, does that. And that is a positive in and of itself. As an overall experience, 63 minutes may be just a little bit too long. And again, this was something that was boosted up by a lot of periods of that sort of pseudo-industrial ideal, either that or those sort of build-up moments, especially within those 6-minute... These 6-minute cuts, the runtime suggested something vastly different than what was actually received. You're actually getting probably about 4 to 4.5 minutes of actual song. And I feel that some of that could have been trimmed or cut down a little bit. But those are just nitpicky elements. Overall, It's 21 out of 30. Pretty strong release, I have to say. This is an album that has a little bit of something for every Slipknot fan out there. They're going to be very pleased with this. And it also does give a lot of welcome to new fans. And I think that that's something that all bands really need to do, especially ones that have been around for more than 2 decades. But I want to know what you think about We Are Not Your Kind by Slipknot. I eagerly await your responses in the comments box below, and I will talk to you later. My name is coverkillernation, and I know throughout the years we have probably butted heads quite a bit about this band, but it is nice to talk about them one final time, and I will talk to you guys next time. Take care.